Okay, so let's talk about selling your comics to comic book shops. Now, if you missed last week's video, not a problem. That video gave a little bit of an overview of how comic book shops work. That's going to come up at the end of this one, so don't worry if you've missed that. But in this video, I'm going to deep dive a little bit into how and when to approach comic book shops to try and sell them your comics, because there is a very specific way you need to do this, okay? Now, if you have created your very first comic and it's printed and it's ready to go, congratulations, you are on the path. But having that comic is only half the battle. The other half of the battle is getting it out into the world. Comic book shops are going to be your best bet to get out there because they are the lifeblood of the industry, as I've said a dozen times on this channel, okay? And if you're a comic book fan like I am, you probably got a local comic book shop. That's going to be your first point of call because you're going to know the owner or you're going to know the manager. And you know what? Just slip in the conversation that you've just made a comic, and would they mind sticking it on the counter, sticking a few copies and try and sell it to the other local fans that are coming to the shop. 9 times out of 10 your local comic book shop, of course they're going to support you, especially if you've been a long-standing customer of theirs. They're going to show you the support that you've given them over the years, okay? So that is your first point of call, is your local comic book shop. But we need to expand that network out into other comic shops you need to approach. Now, to do that, you're gonna need one of these, okay? These things are not just used to play Wordle, these are telephones, okay? So you need to call comic book shops. But I know you're thinking, well, Matt, I could just send them an email. That's all I need to do. Wrong. Sending a comic shop an email saying, would you like to stock my book, when they don't know you and you don't have that relationship and you don't have that rapport with you, is either it's going to go into their spam folder or they are going to ignore it. Purely because they don't know you, and you need to make the effort to get to know these comic book shops, say hello, learn the owners, because you need to build your relationship with these people. And you need to remember, you are approaching a small business to do you a favor. You're not doing them a favor by stocking your book. They are doing you a favor, okay? So the least you can do is actually give them a phone call rather than sending them just a generic email saying, hi, do you stock these type of books? I've just finished my first comic. Would you like to stock it? Here's a PDF. If I was a business owner and I saw that and I've got a business to run, unless, that comic was drawn by one of my favorite creators or a creator I knew really, really well, I'm not even going to answer that email, purely because I don't have the time, because I've got a business to run. Now, this doesn't mean you can't approach comic shops in other different ways, like if you're on social media and you follow a load of comic shops on Twitter and you retweet their stuff quite a lot, they retweet you and you follow each other. There's nothing wrong with reaching out through them through the DMs and just asking them, do they stock comics? But let's be honest, if they are following you on social media and you have been, teasing your comic on there, there's a good chance they already know about it. So when you send them a message through social media, it's not a cold email, it's more of a warm one, because they know who you are and you've kind of had that social relationship online. But there are hundreds of other comic book shops that don't know you, don't have, Twitter accounts, don't have Instagram accounts, and more importantly, don't know you. And we're talking about sales now, and people buy people. I know that sounds like a really cliched thing to say, but I promise you it's actually true. Okay, so when do you call these comic shops? As a rule, never call a comic shop on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, and possibly a Sunday. And there is a very good reason for this. If you have a local comic book shop, you will know that Wednesdays is New Comic Book Day, when all the new comic books are released, from Marvel, DC, Image, and so forth. So Wednesdays is pretty much a comic shop one of their busiest days. Also Saturdays as well, because people are coming in at the weekend to pick up their books, and Sundays, if some shops are open Sundays as well, and normally they have shorter opening hours, so they are going to be busy during that small time window that they're actually open. But the reason why you don't call on a Tuesday as well is comic shops are actually getting ready for New Comic Book Day the next day, so they are clearing their shelves, putting the new comics up, getting ready for that next day of business. Okay, so don't call on a Tuesday, don't call on a Wednesday, Saturday, or a Sunday. Now, me personally, when I call comic book shops, I tend to do it on a Monday or a Thursday, usually around 11 o'clock. And there is a very good reason for this, because most comic book shops open around 10 o'clock. This allows the owner or the manager to come in and, get ready for their day, have their coffee, turn the lights on, turn the register on, that kind of thing. So you're not jumping on them as soon as they open. And it's also just before lunchtime. So they're not going to get, the customers that do tend to come in at lunchtime to pick up their books. You're not going to get in the way of those as well. So normally for me, a Monday and a Thursday is always a good time to call. But now we need to find out, how are we going to find all these comic shops that we're actually going to speak to? So we're just going to jump on my PC and I'm going to show you how. Okay, so before you actually start calling comic book shops, what I want you to do is I want you to grab a notebook or jump into Excel, and I want you to create a table to keep a record of all the shops that you are contacting. Now, this table I've created is in the Google Drive link that I've created for the channel, and that's a link in the description so you can download it, as well as all the other resources that I've created over the last year and a bit. It's very simple. It's very self-explanatory. All I want you to do is just put a couple of columns in there, one for the store name, for the address where they are in the world, their telephone number, the contact, the person that you're actually speaking to in the shop, the email address, and notes. And the reason for this is because you want to keep a record of all the shops that you were speaking to, especially if you need to send them a PDF after you've spoken to them and you need to follow it up, because that's one of the keys to actually calling to comic book shops. When you speak to them, they'll probably ask you to send a copy. So once you've sent it, you can follow it up. Also, you're trying to be professional. Keep it a record of all the shops that you've contacted and the people that you've spoken to. Will also stop you from calling the same comic book shop twice and then going, Matt, you're an idiot. You've already spoken to us. We actually stock your book. Okay, so this is the first point I want you to do. Just create a little table just so you can keep a record of all the comic book shops that you are contacting. Okay, so let's talk about finding comic book shops. Now, we all live in the modern world, so I'm not going to teach you how to suck eggs on how to use Google and searching for comic book shops. But what I'm going to suggest is there are a couple of websites that I know of that might help you find comic shops in your local area, in your local network, and a little bit further afield. Now, the first one is the Comic Shop Locator service. Now, it's a global website. Really easy to use. All you need to do is put your postcode in or your zip code, and what it will do is it will give you some comic book shops in your local area. Okay, now this is what I suggest you do. I suggest you start again with your local comic book shop and then slowly expand into other areas, the town next to it, the city next to it, that kind of thing, and then just slowly build up your network. Now, if you are in the UK, there is another great website that I suggest you use, and that is downthetubes.net by the great John Freeman. If you do not follow him on Twitter, you totally should, because he's a very awesome guy. Now, he has given us an entire map of the UK of all the comic book shops, well, all the ones that are registered, and there are a lot. So what I would do is, if I was you, is again look at your area and then look at the surrounding areas and find some of the comic shops that you are gonna contact. And then what I would do is that table that you've created, start clicking on some of the stores that are on this map, and then making a note of the addresses, the telephone numbers, and the locations of where these shops are, because they're the people that we're going to call starting in next week's video. Okay, so that's it for this week. Hopefully you found it useful. I will see you in the next one, and thanks for watching. Bye.